Welcome to Totality Town. The solar eclipse is getting closer, 129 days from now. So why do people get so excited about total solar eclipses? The moon blocks the sun and you can't see it for a few minutes. Big deal, right? Actually, yeah, it is a big deal. Also, most people think of solar eclipses as something that only lasts a few minutes, but the reality is that there's a lot more to see. When you include all of the partial phases of the eclipse, the event lasts roughly 3 hours from start to finish. While totality is the apex of the event, there's still a lot of other stuff to see. Covering everything that happens during a total solar eclipse might be too much for one episode, so this could end up being a bit too long. I'm recording now, but if the title of the episode says part 1, then obviously you'll know I had to break this up into 2 parts. If I do, don't worry, part 2 will be the April 2024 video. Before we get too deep into this, remember that the exact time things happen during a solar eclipse depends on your precise location on the ground. So check the exact times well before the eclipse. My favorite tool for solar eclipse research is Xavier Hubier's website. I'll link to it in the show notes, but you can also get to it by scanning the QR code on the second to back page of the countdown calendar. The maps are Google-style interactive maps, and these are really good. Click on any location and the exact timings for the eclipse for that exact spot on the map will pop up. And we're going to walk through some of what you see in that pop-up window. Solar eclipses begin at what's known as first contact, abbreviated as C1, and that's when the moon first touches the sun's disk. I always enjoy seeing that happen. You look forward to eclipses for months, if not years, and it's an excitement and a relief when it finally begins. The total phase of the eclipse is between C2 and C3, and contact 4 is when the eclipse is completely over. Remember that you always need to be using eclipse glasses when looking at the sun during the partial phases of the eclipse. This is also a great time to see the sun through a telescope. April 2024 is going to be near solar maximum, so there should be lots of different sunspot activity. And watching the moon's limb get closer to sunspots and then eventually cover them is a lot of fun. I'll have a separate video on different tools for observing eclipses both with and without a telescope. And it's not as expensive as you might think. There's a lot of fun stuff that you can play around and do. That video will be linked at the end of this one when I finally get it produced, and you should definitely go check it out. A great activity during the partial phases after C1 is to use a pinhole projector. They're really easy to make. You can do it with tin foil and a paper plate and some tape. But some people simply use the strainer, the colander from the kitchen. Every little hole projects its own image of the sun, and you can watch a bunch of suns change shape as the sun progresses during the eclipse and the moon blocks more and more of the sun. You won't start to notice any real changes in the brightness of the day around you until the partial phase is well underway, probably like 75–80% before you notice much. And that's because the sun's surface is just so bright. The light is so intense. Once we get above 80%, you'll notice some changes in the brightness around you. And it's very noticeable when you get up to 90% and dramatic when you get to 95% and upwards. As far as I know, there aren't any tools for predicting exactly what time the sun will reach what percentage of eclipse. Like, when will the sun reach 90% eclipsed? If there's a tool like that, I haven't found it yet. If I do find it, I'll be sure to post that in the show notes here. The most dramatic parts of a total solar eclipse happen in the 5 minutes before and after the moon completely covers the sun. First, you get a phenomenon that astronomers still don't entirely understand: shadow bands, and sometimes you'll hear them called shadow snakes. Shadow bands are thin, wavy lines of alternating light and dark that you can see moving and undulating and parallel on plain colored surfaces immediately before and after totality. I've heard different times for when shadow bands occur, but they generally range from looking 1 to 3 minutes before or after the total phase begins or ends. These are really difficult to catch in photos, by the way, because the movement is so quick. Video seems to make it a little bit easier, as you can see here. But as I said, astronomers don't know the exact cause of shadow bands. NASA has some articles saying that they suspect it's related to turbulence in the Earth's atmosphere because the amount of the light coming from the sun is becoming a smaller and smaller sliver. Part of what makes shadow bands mysterious is that although they've been noted throughout history, they're incredibly inconsistent. They're very pronounced on some eclipses and faint or even completely absent during other events. Scientists just haven't really been able to nail down the specific circumstances that influence shadow bands. One of the other features that's visible, but this one in every total solar eclipse, is Baily's beads. These were also observed a number of times in history, but it wasn't until the 1800s that Francis Baily put a name to them over in England. This image by Guillermo Abramson does a marvelous job showing them. Baily's beads happen in the last minute or so before and after totality, and what causes them is kind of neat. The edge of the moon is not perfectly even or smooth. You've got mountains and valleys all along that edge. Right before totality, the valleys along the edge are low enough that some of the sun's disk still hasn't quite been covered up yet. So you've got mountains sticking up a little bit higher, cutting off light earlier than it's happening down in the bottom of the valleys. And so you get dark spots. And so the overall effect is that it looks like beads of light on a necklace. Guillermo's image is a sequence of pictures, all taken within a very short period of time as the sun gets closer and closer to the total phase. You can see the remaining light from the sun being blocked and broken up into smaller beads as the seconds pass. Again, times will vary, but you'll see Baily's beads within 3 minutes or less of the total phase. I'm pretty sure all of the pictures that were part of this composite were taken within 1 to 2 minutes time. By the way, also, Baily's beads are not a naked eye part of solar eclipses. They're too small to be seen with the naked eye. So you do need a telescope for these, and it still absolutely needs a safe solar filter on it. Second fun fact, Baily's beads are also part of annular solar eclipses. By this time in the eclipse, you'll notice a dramatic change in the light around you. It's dimmer, but the character of the light is just different. It's hard to explain. Everything becomes sharper. My wife's description of this is still the best one I've heard. She said, this is kind of like the light that Hollywood is trying to copy in those post-apocalyptic movie scenes. By the way, before we go any further into the eclipse and features, one important note about photography. Either don't try it at all, just enjoy the event, or look into a software program that allows you to pre-program the camera settings. One of the worst things in the world is to be stressing over camera settings and equipment, looking down and fiddling with the stuff, instead of being able to look up and soak in every moment of what comes next. Trust me, I know, I've learned this the painful way. The final Baily's bead to disappear is a special event, and this part is a naked eye feature. Some people might tell you that you should still have your eclipse glasses on for those last 3 seconds, but my guess is that more than 99% of people take the eclipse glasses off for the final few seconds before totality. Because what happens is the glare from that last bead right before it disappears, the glare just shoots out, and for a brief moment it causes what's known as the diamond ring effect. Pretty obvious where the name comes from. The diamond ring is literally the final 3 seconds or so. And when it disappears, that's what officially marks the beginning of the total phase of the eclipse. Again, now, eclipse glasses need to be off now. Totality is awesome. You've seen a bunch of pictures by now, and I could spend a lot of time trying to describe the experience, but that's still not going to prepare you for it. Anyone who has seen totality gets what I'm talking about. anyone who hasn't seen yet, mark your calendars. Okay, looking at the recording timestamp, and this video is going to be too long if I try and do everything in one. So we're going to cut it off here, and part 2 is going to be the April 2024 video, where we're just going to talk about what happens during the total phase of the eclipse itself. I'm not going to publish that until April 1st, 2024, but for those of you that have the countdown calendar, you can access it there. And those of you guys who are watching this video, look in the show notes. I'll have a link there just for you guys, but it's not going to be set to be open with like a general YouTube search. Thank you guys for joining me again here on Totality Town. We'll see you next month as we get ever closer to the great North American total solar eclipse.